The prairie was quiet in the way that only vast emptiness can be, an ocean of grass rolling out to the horizon, its golden blades rippling like waves beneath the steady sweep of wind. Samuel Briggs stood in the doorway of his cabin, hat tugged low to shade his eyes, and let the silence press down on him. He had grown used to it, even married himself to it, though some nights he swore the loneliness would eat him alive. At 40, he looked closer to 50. The years had hardened him, sun had carved his face, and solitude had etched deep furrows in his brow. His ranch was little more than a skeleton now. The cattle were mostly gone, scattered by drought and hard seasons, the fences sagged and leaned as if tired of standing, and the house itself looked like it was waiting to fall. He lived by routine, wake with the sun, tend to the few animals that remained, fix what could be fixed, eat what little he had, and sit by the fire until sleep claimed him. He hadn't touched a woman in 15 years, hadn't heard a voice softened by tenderness or laughter. He told himself he didn't need it, that those days belonged to men who still had the energy to chase dreams. But there were nights when he'd sit staring into the flames, his calloused hands lying empty in his lap, and feel the hollow ache of absence so sharp he thought it might split him open. That morning he was chopping wood, his axe biting into the stump in steady, measured blows, when he heard a sound he hadn't expected in years, the rolling thunder of wheels. A stagecoach, coming up the old trail, kicking up dust in a long, golden plume. Samuel set the axe down, frowning. Few people had reason to come this way anymore. Travelers avoided these roads, tradesmen knew there was nothing worth selling out here. He stood still, one hand shading his eyes, and watched the coach grow larger until it rattled to a stop in front of his cabin. The driver, a grizzled man with a cigar clenched between his teeth, jumped down and opened the door. From inside stepped a woman. She looked travel-worn but determined, her dress wrinkled from long miles, a bonnet askew on her head. She carried a small carpetbag, gripped tightly, as though it contained her entire life. Samuel felt his chest tighten as he watched her scan the cabin, the broken fences, and then settle her gaze on him. "Mr. Briggs?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. Samuel blinked. "That's me." Her shoulders loosened slightly, and she stepped closer, dust clinging to the hem of her dress. "I'm Eliza Turner," she said. "The agency sent me, your bride." For a moment, Samuel didn't move. The words hung in the air, absurd in their weight. Bride. He almost laughed, but the sound caught in his throat. He rubbed a hand across his beard, trying to make sense of what he'd just heard. "There's been a mistake," he said finally. "I sent for no one." Her expression flickered, pride battling with panic. "But, the letter said Briggs Ranch, near Willow Creek. You are Samuel Briggs, aren't you?" "I am," he admitted slowly. "But I never wrote no letter." Her face paled, and she clutched the bag tighter. For the first time, Samuel noticed the way her hands trembled. The driver, impatient, spat in the dirt and tipped his hat. "Next coach won't be through for near 3 weeks, he said. "She'll have to wait it out." With that, he snapped the reins and the coach rattled away, leaving a swirl of dust and silence behind. Eliza stood rooted, the wind tugging at her bonnet. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, though she kept her chin lifted, refusing to crumble. Samuel's stomach twisted. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't asked for anyone, yet here she was, left at his doorstep like some cruel joke. He could turn her away, send her to the barn or tell her to make her way to town, but one look at her face made the words die in his throat. "You'd best come inside," he muttered, stepping aside. "No sense standing out here." She hesitated, then followed him into the cabin. The room was dim, the air heavy with the smell of smoke and leather. Tools cluttered the table, and a pile of wood rested by the hearth. It wasn't a home so much as a shelter. Samuel cursed himself silently for the state of it, but Eliza said nothing. She set her carpetbag down and sat on the edge of a chair he offered, her back straight, her dignity intact despite her circumstance. He busied himself with the fire, striking a match, feeding kindling until flames licked up the blackened stone. As the warmth spread, he stole a glance at her. She looked young, no more than 23, maybe 24, with sharp features softened by exhaustion. Strands of hair had slipped from her bonnet, curling against her cheek. She caught him looking, and for a moment their eyes met. Samuel looked away quickly, the heat of embarrassment rising under his weathered skin. "What happens now?" she asked quietly, her voice breaking the silence. Samuel shrugged, unsure of his own answer. "You wait," he said simply, "until the next coach comes. Then you can find the man who sent for you." She nodded, though her lips pressed tight. The fire crackled, filling the space between them. Samuel sat across from her, his large hands folded awkwardly. For 15 years, he'd lived in silence, and now, in the span of minutes, the cabin felt different. The air seemed warmer, the emptiness less suffocating. He had not touched a woman in so long that the very nearness of her unsettled him. Even the sound of her breathing felt like a trespass into the fortress he had built around himself. That night, he gave her his bed while he laid a blanket by the hearth. She protested, but he waved her off, too stubborn to let pride falter. Lying on the floor, Samuel stared at the ceiling long into the dark. The storm of her arrival churned in his mind. She wasn't meant for him, that much was clear. But as the fire dimmed and the wind whispered against the cabin walls, he realized that for the first time in years, he did not feel entirely alone. The days that followed stretched out in a strange, suspended rhythm. Samuel had lived alone for so long that another person's presence unsettled every corner of his ranch. Eliza was careful not to intrude, yet she left marks of herself everywhere. He'd find the water bucket filled before he rose, or the table swept clear of tools. The first morning she baked cornbread from the little flowers she carried in her bag, and when he came in from mending a fence, the smell stopped him cold at the doorway. He couldn't recall the last time food had welcomed him home. Eliza kept herself busy, though Samuel noticed the set of her jaw when she thought he wasn't looking. She'd sit by the fire at night, sewing small repairs into her dress, her face calm but her eyes distant, carrying the weight of a woman who had crossed miles for a future that had dissolved at his doorstep. Samuel wanted to speak, to tell her he was sorry for the mistake, but words didn't come easy. Instead, he kept to chores, letting silence fill the gaps between them. Yet silence did not feel the same as it once had. At supper, even when they spoke little, he felt her nearness like a fire against his skin. He caught himself noticing the curve of her hands as she tore bread, the way her hair slipped loose when she bent to stir the stew. He was ashamed of it, 15 years without a woman, and now one sat at his table, not his, not meant for him, and his body remembered things his heart had tried to bury. One evening, a storm rolled in. The sky split open with thunder, and rain hammered the roof until leaks sprang in thin, cold trickles. Samuel set buckets under the drips while Eliza held the lantern steady. A sudden flash of lightning startled her, and she flinched close to him, her hand brushing his arm. It was nothing, barely a touch, but it struck through him like a spark. He felt the warmth of her skin, the softness that his calloused hands had long forgotten. She pulled back quickly, murmuring an apology, but Samuel only nodded and returned to the task. He didn't trust himself to speak. That night, the storm howled, rattling the shutters and making the cabin groan. Samuel lay awake by the hearth, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the rain pound. Across the room, Eliza shifted restlessly in his bed, the thunder shaking her out of shallow sleep. At last, her soft voice carried through the dark. "Mr. Briggs." He turned his head toward her shadowed shape. "What is it?" "I'm not afraid of hard work. I came here ready for it. But I never thought I'd be left behind." Her words cracked, and he heard the quiver she had been holding back for days. "All I wanted was a chance. To belong somewhere, to someone." Samuel swallowed hard. He hadn't heard another soul confide anything real in 15 years. His throat tightened, but he managed. "You don't deserve what's happened. The world can be cruel. Crueler still to women who try to make their way alone." Her silence lingered, broken only by the storm. Then softly, almost a whisper, "You've been alone a long time, haven't you?" The question slipped past his defenses. He exhaled a bitter laugh. 15 years. That's a long time to live with no one to talk to but cattle and coyotes. "I can't imagine it." "You learn not to feel," he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. "Or you try not to. Easier that way." The storm rolled on, but inside the cabin something shifted. The distance between them felt smaller, as if the storm itself had pressed them together. The next day dawned clear and sharp. The world outside glistened, the grass jeweled with droplets, the sky scrubbed clean. Eliza stepped out to gather water, her skirt brushing wet earth, and Samuel watched from the doorway. She looked different in sunlight, alive, determined, as if the storm had washed away her weariness. He found himself smiling before he caught it and turned away. As the days stretched toward weeks, something unspoken grew between them. Samuel began to linger at the table a little longer after supper. Eliza hummed while she worked, her voice low and sweet, a sound so foreign in the cabin that it nearly brought him to tears. Once, she joined him outside as he fixed a fence, holding nails steady while he hammered. Their hands brushed when he passed the tools, and both pretended not to notice, though the moment lingered in the charged air. Still, Samuel held himself back. He knew she wasn't meant for him. A mistake had brought her here, and soon another coach would carry her away. He reminded himself of it each night, like a prayer against temptation. But the ache inside him grew harder to ignore. On the 12th evening, Eliza sat by the fire sewing while Samuel carved a piece of wood with his knife. The glow lit her face in warm amber, and he caught himself staring too long. She felt it, and her needle paused. Slowly, she set her work aside and met his gaze. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. "You don't have to keep your distance," she said softly. "I'm not made of glass." His chest tightened. He wanted to deny it, to claim he wasn't keeping anything, but the truth lay plain between them. He dropped his eyes, voice rough. "I'm a man who forgot what it means to share his life." 15 years of silence, hard to undo that overnight. "Maybe it doesn't have to be undone," she replied. "Maybe it just needs someone willing to listen." He looked up, and the firelight danced in her eyes. In that moment, Samuel felt the walls he had built for years begin to crack. His hand twitched at his side, yearning to reach across the space and touch hers, but he held himself still, afraid of the flood that one touch might unleash. The silence stretched, heavy and full, and then she rose, crossing the small room until she stood before him. Slowly, she laid her hand on his. It was the gentlest touch, yet it struck him harder than any blow he'd taken in his life. His breath caught, his chest shuddered, and all the years of emptiness broke open at once. He looked up at her, at the quiet strength in her gaze, and for the first time in 15 years, he let himself feel the weight of another's presence not as a burden, but as a gift. Neither spoke again. The fire popped, the night pressed close, and in the small cabin on the edge of the prairie, two lonely souls sat together, the silence finally softened by the touch of a hand.